Welcome to Learning Aloud, a podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I am your host, Zach Davis. I'm joined today by two special guests, Shawn Hayashi, CEO and founder of the Professional Development Group, executive coach, high-performing teams consultant, speaker, and newly added faculty member, along with Stephen G. Hart, senior consultant and executive coach, recently joining the Professional Development Group in October of 2019 after retiring from his VP post at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. Stephen's also taught a few different courses in the program. Both Shawn and Steve are graduates of the Organizational Dynamics program here at Penn, and they're co-teaching a new course this summer titled How to Think, Speak, and Act Like a Great CEO. Shawn, Steve, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So we talked in the green room earlier, and the two of you have a history of working together. Shawn, would you mind starting us off? How did you first connect?
Steve and I met, I think it was 22 years ago, when a colleague of his, a senior leader in the Federal Reserve Bank system where he worked, introduced us. And over time, we got to know each other, had lunch, got together at association meetings and so forth, and just discovered how much we have in common, how great we are at popcorning ideas together. And then we began to collaborate on other kinds of projects together, both at his work and through some associations. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to build a great relationship with not only somebody who is an organization dynamics grad, but also is committed to some of the same kinds of things that I am.
That's great. And Steve, you've taught a few courses in the program. What inspired you to work with Shawn on this particular course?
Well, this is such a delight for me to have somebody who I work with, but whom I consider a really good, great friend. And because of our relationship together over so long, we've always sought for opportunities to spend time together, to teach and to share our knowledge with other people. And it's been a great partnership and a great pleasure to be part of Shawn's orbit for so long and being able to share time with her and to share knowledge with her. So we look for this opportunity because now that I'm working with the Professional Development Group, a lot of the focus of the work is on CEO development, how to build great CEOs and build great teams in organizations. And we thought, how about we take that area of practice where we're both involved and bring it to light for our students? Because at the heart, we're looking about developing people effectively in their roles and building great teams in organizations. And so this was an opportunity to collaborate, to build this course, but it also helps in the work that we're doing together to build great teams and build great CEOs.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And so we have some background as well. I've attended a few of your classes, Steve, and especially enjoyed the Power Hour format. How does that fit within your teaching philosophy, and will it make an appearance in this class?
Yeah, so the Power Hour is a concept that I invented. Well, it may be somebody else's invention, but I co-opted it. I don't know where it came from. But my philosophy of teaching at Penn, particularly in the Organizational Dynamics program, is that the best outcomes are when we have what I would call a student-centered learning accountability, where the students are really learning and applying what they learn in a way that is meaningful to them, rather than me enforcing my view or opinions on them and expecting them to do the same thing that I do. So I love this idea of student-centered learning accountability. And one of the ways I do that is I find topics within the content of courses that I teach where the students bring the learning to the class. And they do a little bit of a research around a topical area. They bring a slide deck, or they bring a way to interact with the rest of us in the class. And we have a robust discussion around something that they have brought. And so the Power Hour are part of the course that Shawn and I will teach. There will be segments of the class where students will be invited to bring in content from the outside that they have researched independently, and that we will then rigorously and enthusiastically debate that in the class and have robust discussions around it.
And as part of that, student-centered approach that you said, that accountability to bring in that outside material. How does that relate to an email I just got the other day about, was it an assessment, Shawn, for the course, or what was it that you're soliciting from the students ahead of time?
Oh, great question. There's actually two pieces. One is an assessment and the other one is a survey. I'll talk quickly about both. The assessment is something that the individual completes related to himself. So it looks at what's your preferred communication style? What are your motivators? What are your competencies? What's your level of emotional intelligence? And this helps us in the course to tease out at an individual level, what are someone's strengths? What are their blind spots? How could we design a role that would really play to the best of who you are? And what's the ideal environment for you that's going to enable you to succeed as a leader? And we'll take that at the individual level and then we'll look at it across the whole course so that people can see how, if they were working together as a leadership team themselves, here's how they could begin to play to each other's strengths. It'll also help their relationships with their colleagues as well.
So
and then
can I ask you a question about that assessment? Then we can talk about the survey as well.
Sure.
So what gave you the idea for that assessment? Why? Where did that come from? Is that a part of the work that you do today, or can you talk a little bit about that? What inspired you to bring the assessment into this class?
Yes. So Zach, that is the first part in the executive coaching process that Steve and I both do with our clients. So we begin with an assessment, and then we do a perceptual interview 360, and from that we're able to build individual development plans for people. And so we're going to show our participants in our course those components and how to do that. So they're getting the best of, in essence, an experience having an executive coach, as well as being in the course and thinking of themselves as executive leaders.
Gotcha.
But the second piece of this, the survey, I'm very excited about. We created a survey to identify what creates great leadership now, today. What created great leadership 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is quite different from what it takes today. And we've sent this survey, it's gone out to all the organization dynamics students, past students, and so forth, but we've also sent it out to thousands of other people. We want to make certain that we get international representation in the survey, and we're going to use our findings from that in informing some of the discussions in the course. We will probably use it in a couple of other ways in the program as well. But we're real excited about this. We hired a Wharton MBA student to help us in the design and the execution of the survey, and she's just doing a great job. We're thrilled.
That's great. And full disclosure, I got the email yesterday. I clicked on it. I responded. So I did take care of that. It's great. It's great to hear how you're incorporating the metrics and introducing some additional data to help inform the way the course is being taught. It's a nice integration of the material that you're planning on bringing in, plus some of the outside influence and bringing in some of the feedback from the Dynamics community as well. So what would you say? You mentioned that part of the goal of this survey is to identify current trends. What are some of the current trends that you've seen and that you have experienced in your professional lives? Steve, if you could start us off, what do you see? What's happening in the realm of leadership today?
Yes. Well, as we record this, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So, pandemic aside, there were already some amazing things going on in leadership before all of this started, which I think only the pandemic has now accelerated to some degree. But let me talk about some foundational things that even if we weren't in the pandemic, what was going on the horizon of leadership. And I would say that we're in an area of great transition, right? For many years during my executive career, people talked about the baby boom retirement age would have an impact on what organizations do. And we're starting to finally see all of that come to life now. So we're seeing great transition in leadership opportunities in organization, but we're also seeing simultaneously with that a significant shift in the proposition of what leadership is for a new workforce. very different kind of workforce than the one I started in my career. Much more flexible, much more open, very diverse, different types of propositions for what it takes to be part of an organization. How people want to feel to be part of an organization is very different. Loyalties have shifted. What people expect from leaders in their organizations and how leadership manifests itself is not so much in the hierarchical form that we were all maybe used to. It's becoming to be a much more collaborative and much more shared responsibility in organizations. And I'm feeling that the transition has started very realistically towards that. And I think after the pandemic, that is actually going to be continuing in that realm once we get back to what might be the new normal.
So you mentioned that things are more collaborative, more shared responsibilities. What is it that? What are some things that are driving that? Where is that collaboration, that desire, that to share more? What do you think is contributing to that?
Well, I think complexity, right? So it used to be that when organizations had 3 to 5 year strategic plans, people had a clear sense of where they were going. But strategic planning is not really working as well anymore as in the way that it used to be. We're living in a far more complex world than we used to. And it's very likely that leaders these days don't have all of those answers. In the hierarchical structure of organizations, leaders are expected to know the direction and where we're going. But in a complex world, the most dominant form of leadership is that you really don't know all of the answers yourself. So you have to find a way to draw people to you as a leader so that they share with you what it is they see, what perspectives they have of what the work is and how it can be done. And I think that's part of the major shift that we're starting to see in the development of leaders, is how to be more collaborative, how to be more open, how to be more inclusive.
Thank you. So Shawn, to build on that, in your work as an executive coach and in working to develop leaders, how prepared do you think leaders are to tackle some of these challenges that Steve mentioned? I mean, do his comments reflect what you're also seeing in the years of work you've had helping to develop executive leaders in organizations?
The organizations that are growing and thriving, especially right now, are led by leadership teams that see themselves as collaborators. They're wearing a facilitator hat. As Steve said, they recognize they don't already know it all. They've got to be curious. They've got to ask questions. They've got to be willing to explore and experiment. And so as a result, they engage in completely different ways. They seek to ask the question, what does great look like? And how could we create that? They're solutions focused. They're willing to make decisions, even if they don't have all the data or the information. And they'll experiment and try things in some new ways, move forward, and then reevaluate a decision. But they also recognize, and I think this is a very important one, that we need a leadership team today, not a group of individual siloed leaders. And that doesn't work. And I'm thinking right now of one of the companies that I've been working with for several years, and their growth is just incredible right now. And it's because they've mastered having a leadership team where this group makes key decisions together. They understand who owns the accountability to make the decision. They give each other the puzzle pieces, the information, the insights, the brainstorming that they need to support, and then they understand it and embrace the decision maker's directive, and they move forward. And it's exciting to watch that happen today.
Great, thank you. So as you've submitted the survey out to the organizational dynamics community, any thoughts, any ideas about what do you expect? What do you think the students may come back with? Do you care to make any conjectures about what you believe the survey might yield?
Well, one of the things I think we ask people to do is, I think it's almost the first question, is identify a leader whom you admire. And I'm a believer that you you don't learn leadership by copying anybody else, but you certainly can learn from somebody else. So I think that's a great opening question, because we'll tease from that answer, what are the essential qualities that an individual brings that makes them such a powerful leader in the mind of that responder? And I think therein lies the clue as to what it is that people are seeking in their own leadership, right? They're making a connection with somebody who connects with them viscerally. And I'm hoping that that is an inspiration for people to tease out the elements of qualities of leadership that therefore then manifest in that person, and be able to identify them and learn to adopt them, not necessarily copy them. So it's that opening question was so vitally important to get somebody in the frame of mind as to, why do I admire this leader and what are the qualities that they bring? So I think part of the expectation is that every one of those students is going to come with somebody different in mind when they start this course. And our hope is that through the assessments that we do and the coaching that we do, that they will connect in visceral ways with the person they admire and begin to learn how to adopt some of those things that they do, but not necessarily copy them.
So, Shawn, what insights do you hope will come from the survey with the students?
In the survey, we also asked people to think about, what does great look like? What is great leadership? And we asked them to hierarchically rank competencies and capacities that great leaders have. And so we're going to be able to see what people today, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, today, are really looking for from their leaders and from themselves. And then we also asked them to identify where they already have these competencies and where they feel like they need developmental opportunities. So we will be able to gauge some of these kinds of things that help inform how to create high-performing leadership teams.
So based on that, the philosophy that went into the course, the things that, the topics that you plan on introducing, the trends, who's the ideal candidate in your view for taking this course?
Yeah, so the ideal candidate is probably somebody with aspirations to be, an executive level leader in an organization, but also somebody who really is passionate about wanting to lead, right? It's one thing to be a leader in an organization, but not necessarily attracted to that aspiration. So we want people in the course who are both attracted to the idea, have some ambition for themselves in their career, but also have a passion for wanting to lead in the very best way possible by bringing the very best pieces of themselves to that assignment. So those are the ideal people that we would love to see. I think I've been at Penn a while now, and I've noticed we tend to get a really nice, diverse cross-section of people very early in their careers, maybe people later in their careers. But I'm hoping that we can find that sweet spot for all of them, that they come with ambition and they come with some passion.
Oh, that's great. So you mentioned a couple of times, now both of you have, about the ideal scenario, about leading and what good looks like, what great looks like, actually, developing competencies, ambitions to lead. There's anyone can steer the ship when seas are calm, right? So recent events, I'd like to shift gears a little bit, and we'd be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge the pandemic and the crisis that has thrust many leaders into the spotlight. And in many cases, leaders are having to make strategic decisions without all of the information, without knowing, without a handbook. In many cases, there is no blueprint for how to successfully navigate through this. So, politics aside, have you observed any leaders acting like a great CEO in response to the current pandemic? Shawn, why don't we start with you?
So one of my clients is the CEO of a food manufacturing company, and they are doing some great things right now. They have decided to hire 5 additional people with the intention to help continue to grow the business. They recognize they will be able to get great candidates at this time. They've also identified ways to package their food items that they can donate to food pantries. And they're doing that in a very heartfelt way. That's just an example of, as a result of asking the kinds of questions like, how can we keep growing? What are the opportunities for us to contribute in new ways that we might never have thought of? And what are our strengths that we can begin to leverage to add value in ways we might never have considered in the past? It's the companies that are asking those kinds of questions and that have authentic leadership teams working on it.
Okay. So Steve, would you care, Shawn made a comment at the very end of that I know may resonate with you, and because it's come up in some of our previous class discussions around the topic of authenticity. So would you care to elaborate on authenticity and authentic leaders as a concept?
Yeah, so authenticity it might be a double-edged sword, right? There are two potential things about that. One is, do we always want leaders truly working from their authentic selves? Well, if they're a jerk, no. If they are authentically a jerk, we don't want them working from their authentic selves. But I think what's really meant in the context of this is really somebody that has care and attention to the broader responsibilities of being a leader. And at the heart of all of that is I think of authenticity as in the right frame of mind is the way in which you build trust in an organization. And I find it very hard to conceptualize that any kind of leader who doesn't work from a foundation of trust is never going to be effective at leading other people. They're never going to gain the credibility that they need. They're never going to have the followership that you need to be a leader. So I think of authenticity as a positive derivative of that, thinking that it really means working from a sense of care and attention to the people around you and the needs that they have in the organization, and making sure that you attend to those requirements in a authentic, caring way in order to build the trust that you need to have the credibility that is required to be an effective leader. It's not a complicated process, but it is linked in that way, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Shawn, you'd mentioned in talking, the 360 assessments and the executive coaching work that you've done. Part of the goal of that is to help leaders recognize blind spots that they may have. How would you advise a leader in a time of crisis? How would you coach them through a blind spot that might actually be impeding their ability to lead effectively through this kind of a crisis?
So that depends on what the blind spot is, because first I've got to help them become clear, aware of what their blind spot is and what the ripple effect is of that blind spot. But in organizations where we've done high-performing teamwork, now each individual on the leadership team is very clear about his or her strengths and blind spots, and how people can pass the baton back and forth when they need to, when to do that, why to do that. So somebody who has a blind spot, let's say, in my case, while writing is certainly a component of my work, I'm not someone who can catch my own typing or editorial issues. And so I've got somebody on my team who is very gifted in that. And we know that she's going to double check anything I write before it goes out. That's just one example of a blind spot. But as it relates to things that are happening right now in this COVID-19 world that we're living in, organizations need to be very service focused. And those organizations that are overly sales focused or overly sort of asking for donations in a way that's not appropriate at this point, they need to recognize that's a blind spot, and they need to stop doing that. Instead, they need to step up and say, how can I serve in a meaningful way and make a contribution? Because if they're unaware that they're creating a blind spot around sort of over focusing on donate to us now, or give me a big contract now. That's just not the mindset where people are at the moment.
So what do you think is paramount for our leaders in creating that compelling vision? You know, there's so much uncertainty right now, right? There's so much that we don't know about, even simple things like when will some people be able to return to work, when you can walk outside without wearing a mask. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know. So what advice would you give to leaders trying to create that vision to help people deal with the uncertainty and keep an eye to the future?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. But, we often think about vision as being grandiose, kind of far in the future kinds of things. But I think when we're in the kind of situation we're in now, we have to really rein in our thinking a little bit around that. So creating a vision that's much more closer at hand, breaking down the vision issue into much closer, immediate next steps, without having precise knowledge, requires, I think, dexterity of mind of the leader and an understanding of the situation and context in which the people that he or she has working for them has at the moment. So right now, I think visions are much shorter term visions. It's what am I going to do today? What are we going to do tomorrow? And then when we meet again tomorrow, we'll see if we have to make any changes in that. So shortening the vision process to some immediate things and restoring some opportunities for people to have some control of how they are operating within that vision. And in fact, even inviting some of the people in your organization to share with you and what the immediate vision would be. I think those are ways to do it. Vision is a compelling leader responsibility. It's often grandiose and big, but right now, I think in the circumstances, we want people to think far more shorter term, be inclusive in the way that you do that, and be open to the prospect of revising it the very next time you meet.
So I have a client who has recently decided with the leadership team that they may not ever go back to having everyone in the office in the way that they did before. And they've actually found that they are far more efficient working in remote teams than they were all being under the same roof. And they are in that stage, like lots of companies are right now, where they are trying to design a new workplace that they've never been in before. And they don't want to be constrained by the past picture of what it did look like. It's now that question of what can we create for the future that would be even better than what we had in the past. And so some of them are talking about having 10% of the staff in an office on Mondays and a different 10% of the staff in the office on Tuesdays and a different 10% of the staff in the office on Wednesdays and so forth. And so that we don't have to worry about having key people in on the same day, such that if there's a second wave or if there is some other kind of issue that bubbles up, then we have to be worried about that. But another thing as well is this idea of the creativity that comes from being in this exploration and allowing new ideas to bubble up and be bounced around and allowing 3 or 4 days to think about it before we make a decision, making the space for this kind of creative exploration.
So it sounds like the leaders and these teams and these companies are really asking themselves, what does great look like? What could it look like? And looking to make the best out of this opportunity. So I want to thank you both for your time. I've been talking today with Shawn Kent Hayashi and Stephen G. Hart. And if you are a passionate student of leadership who wants to continually ask himself or herself, what does great look like? And you want to join an interactive class over the summer and openly debate the possibilities as we move forward, then I encourage you to check out their class on the Organizational Dynamics website, How to Think, Speak, and Act Like a Great CEO. Don't miss the inaugural session this summer. Special thanks to our technical producer, Dan Shields, And thanks again, Shawn and Steve, for your time.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Zach.
I'm Zach Davis with Learning Aloud, a podcast for the organizational dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania.